before we get started today, why don't I just do a few introductions. My name is Margaret Master. I'm the mediator who's been assigned to you this morning, and I just want to make sure that I get each of your names straight. Your name is?
Kathy Egan.
E-G-A-N?
That's correct.
Great. And your name?
I'm Steve Smith.
Okay. Again, I'm Margaret Master, and I'm comfortable using first names today in this mediation. Are each of you comfortable with that?
It's fine.
Is that fine?
Yeah.
Steve?
Yeah,
All right,
that's okay
great.
with me. I'm an agreeable guy.
Great. Well, let me just talk a little bit. What I'm going to do is talk a little bit about what you can expect from this mediation, and then we'll get started. And I want to make sure that I answer any questions for you.
I got it. How long is this whole thing going to take?
Well, it's really going to be up to you. I'm not going to be making any decisions here today, so it's up to you to decide how each of you want to solve the situation that brought you here, and that's really going to be, the time is going to be depending on how our discussion goes. I don't really know anything about the situation, so I'm going to need to learn a little bit more. Mediations can really vary, so why don't we get into it, and then you can see how things are going and decide if it's meeting your schedule. Steve, were there any pressing matters you need to deal with today that we need to make sure?
What do you?
I just want to make sure that I know if there's some time pressure that I should know about.
No, I've got to be somewhere
Let's
this
get back
afternoon.
to the basketball
but,
court this afternoon.
Okay,
probably.
well, let's talk then about what we can expect from this mediation. My job is not going to be the judge or the jury or to be making any decisions. My job is to help guide each of you through this mediation, to discuss whatever brought you here today, and help each of you make some decisions about what you think is going to resolve the situation. So it's real important that I'm neutral and impartial in this process, because I'm not going to be pushing for any one thing or any particular thing to happen here today. And to illustrate that, I want to ask each of you, have either of you ever met me before or worked with me before?
I've never met you.
No, I know that I've never worked with either of you before, and I just wanted to ask that, to really clarify, because I know neither of you really feel that I'm going to be able to be neutral today and to help each of you talk about the situation. Okay. Again, the goal of our meeting is going to be to find some sort of resolution that's going to work for each of you to resolve this situation. And you are the people who are going to be making the decisions about that. My job is going to be to help guide you through that discussion.
Good luck.
All right, good. How are we going to do that? I, again, don't know anything about this situation, so I'm going to be looking to both of you to fill me in on the details and the facts and what your perspective is. So to start out this meeting, after I've finished going through this, I'm going to have each of you give me a picture from your perspective about what's happening and what brought you here today. Who first initiated this matter with the center?
I did.
Okay, then what I'm going to do, Kathy, is I'm going to first ask you to tell me about the situation from your perspective. And during that time, Steve, I'm going to ask that you hold off any comments or any questions that you have until I finish with Kathy. And then when Kathy's finished, Steve, I'm going to give you the same chance to go through what your concerns are, what your perspective is. And during that time, Kathy, I'm going to ask you to hold any comments or questions, because after each of you have given me that perspective of the situation, then I'm going to move towards having us all talk together. So we're going to have a time to all talk together, and you're going to have a time to talk with each other. There might be a time during this meeting where I want to meet with each of you individually, and then we'll have a chance to have those have one-on-one meetings. And we'll come back and continue to talk together and hopefully move towards writing up some sort of agreement. Mediation is a process that gets used in a lot of different kinds of situations, and so oftentimes people do find solutions that satisfy what their concerns are. So I'm confident that we'll be able to move toward that today. Any questions so far about how this works?
I don't think so, no.
Steve?
No, I don't have any questions.
There's a few more things that are important for you to understand before we begin this meeting. And one is that I consider this meeting confidential. That means I'm not going to go outside of this room and talk about this situation with anyone outside of the center. I'm going to be taking notes here today, but those notes are really for my own benefit, just to keep track of what's being said, and I'm going to tear those up at the end. So the only record of this mediation and what went on here today from my perspective is going to be an agreement if we do get to a point of writing one up, and then each of you would get a copy of that, and then the center would keep a copy of that. There is an exception to that confidentiality, which is important for me to explain, and that's if I find out that someone in this room or outside of this room is in danger of serious imminent harm, then I would have to tell the people who I talk with at the center, and they would have to notify the proper authorities if there were some serious imminent harm. So that is the exception to confidentiality. You also want to know that those private meetings that I talked about, if there's something that you want to share with me in those meetings that you would want kept confidential in the same way that this whole process is confidential, you can let me know in that private meeting. Another important thing to understand before we get started is that this mediation is also voluntary. I know the judge may have recommended that you come and try mediation, but now that you're here and you're giving it a try, and I think that's great, it's important for you to know that continuing with the process and agreeing to anything or signing any sort of agreement is voluntary. So don't sign anything and don't agree to anything unless it's what you want to do. Okay? Any questions on those two things?
No.
Okay. Then, lastly, I just want to say that there are a few guidelines which help us have a more productive meeting, and that's if each of you agree to not interrupt each other. And that is particularly important during the beginning when I need to get a sense from each of you about what's going on, what brought you here today. But throughout the meeting, I'm going to make sure that each of you have the time and the opportunity to say what you need to say. So it's important that you can agree not to interrupt each other. Steve, is that something you feel you can do?
I'm not going to interrupt. I'll tell you what I have to say.
Great. And Kathy, is that something you feel you can do?
Of course.
Great. The second thing is that while we're in this room, that all of us try and treat each other with respect while we go through this discussion today. And is that something both of you feel you can do?
I can, yes.
And Steve?
Well, I can. I'm not sure I can trust that she
Great.
will.
Well, both of you were able to commit to that, and that's going to help us run a better meeting here today. And the third thing is just logistically, this building is a non-smoking building, so if there's any need for a cigarette break, we can talk about that when we have some breaks during our mediation today. Okay? Lastly, any questions before we get started? Okay. Now, again, I really don't know anything about what brought you here today, and that's going to help me to understand that. Is going to help me run the meeting better. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn to Kathy, and I'm going to ask you to tell me what brought you here from your perspective. And again, Steve, as soon as I'm finished with Kathy, I'm going to talk to you about that as well. So, Kathy, what brought you here today, and what is it that you're concerned about?
I'm, concerned about being able to live in my home in peace and quiet. And for the last 6 months since this man has moved in, it's been a nightmare. Where to begin? He moves in, and the first thing he does is start construction on the house that begins early in the morning and ends late in the evening. Then he builds this monstrosity of a fence between our property that must be at least 10 feet high.
It's 8 feet high.
Okay. Hold on
I
just
measured
whatever.
it according to the...
I'm glad that you each have a different perspective on this. Hold on just a second. I know that it's easy to jump in and correct things.
Well, she tells you it's 8 feet high, or 10 feet high, and
Who
I'm
cares
telling you
how
the truth
high
that
it
it's
is?
8 feet high, because it'd be illegal if it was 10 feet high.
Steve, I know it's real easy to jump in and correct that, and I want to make sure I get those facts clear. I just don't want to be distracted. So why don't we just hold off a second, and I'll make a note that the fence is 8 feet high, but it seems very large to you,
It's
Kathy.
very high, that's my point. It's a
Okay.
very high fence.
It's 8 feet high.
All right. After that, I find out that his lifestyle is completely different than anyone else's in this neighborhood. He has parties almost every weekend that include basketball playing till all hours of the night. It includes
Please.
drinking. The worst part of it is that the swearing, the arguments, the rowdy behavior on the court, and the people he has over are really disturbing to me. As a single mother with 2 small children, I don't think this is the kind of environment I want my children living next door to. Before he moved in, the nicest people in the world lived next door to us. This sweet couple, we were good friends, good neighbors, and had been for years. Then they sell their property, he moves in, and all hell breaks loose. I don't feel comfortable having my children grow up next
Well,
to somebody
maybe it's
like
time
this.
that you move, and
I've
Hold
been in
on
this
just
neighborhood a
second.
long
Kathy,
time, and
Kathy, Steve, I just want to assure you, Steve, that I will give you a chance to answer any questions that you feel are being asked, or to respond to
All right.
anything,
All right.
as well as to tell it from your perspective. So I need you to hold on
All right.
just a few more minutes while I finish with Kathy, okay?
Well, let me just cut to the chase. The straw that broke the camel's back was our Memorial Day weekend party. Every year I have a party and invite my entire family over and friends. So I'm having this party, which is kind of a formal affair, and he starts basketball in the court next door with all of his friends, his beer drinking, rowdy, carousing friends. In the middle of a party that I'm trying to have on Memorial Day. The noise was outrageous. The language was embarrassing. I had lost it. I lost my temper. I went over next door. I said, this has got to stop. The minute I come up to the court, his friends started making rude comments, and then I get up to him, and I'm screaming at him, telling him that he is ruining this party, that he needs to stop this immediately. I mean, I don't even remember what all I said. And he took me by the arm and shoved me down on his court. I fell down on I was actually crossing his driveway to the court. I fell down on his driveway in some oil from that beater of a truck he drives around. Completely ruined the outfit I was wearing. I went home immediately and called the police. That's all I knew to do. I mean, he's obviously out of control, and somebody needs to do something about him.
She sits here and says that I'm.
Steve, I know it's very difficult. I know it's very difficult to hold on and not comment while things are being said that you have some really important things from your perspective.
These are lies. I mean, you need to understand that these are lies that she's telling you. I did not push her at all.
Steve, one of the things I want to just reiterate about the mediation process is I'm here not to make a decision. So I'm not deciding what's the truth or not the truth. What I want to get right now is the situation from each of your perspectives. So I know it's very difficult when you have a very different sense of what happened. And that's why it's important that I finish with Kathy, getting her sense, because I completely want to hear what your sense is of the situation. So as long as you know that I'm not deciding what happened or what didn't happen by hearing from either of you.
All right.
Hopefully that'll allow you to hold on.
As long as you know that these are lies.
Hopefully that will allow you to hold on while I finish with Kathy, because I need you to be completely quiet so that I'm not getting distracted and I can finish with her.
All right.
Because that'll be important for us moving forward, okay?
All right.
So Kathy, there was this incident where you went over on Memorial Day weekend, and what more do you feel I need to know about that? You talked about being...
Well, my clothes were ruined. I was wearing a silk suit. I had to call the police. Battery charges were filed against him. And that's why we're here. Our case came before the judge. The judge suggested mediation, and here we are.
Okay. I just want to ask a couple of questions and make sure that I have a sense of what I'm hearing from you. How are you neighbors?
Our backyards connect.
Okay.
Or they did connect before he put up that huge fence.
Okay. And Kathy, how long have you been living in this neighborhood?
I lived in this neighborhood, before I got divorced, probably about 9 years.
Okay, so you've been there for some time.
Right.
And I want to run through what I've heard about the situation from your perspective. Steve moved in several months ago.
It was back in the fall.
Okay. And a couple of things that you've talked about, it seems a lot of them relate back to concerns about noise. One of them was the construction.
Yes.
And another is, it sounds like the basketball playing and some of the the sounds you're hearing. It sounds like both language and other noise you talked about from the basketball playing.
Right.
You also talked about a fence that was built and some concerns you had about the fence. You said that you're a mom with 2 kids at home.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And it sounds like a lot of these concerns came together Memorial Day weekend a few weeks ago with a party that you were having and some of the activities that were going on in Steve's backyard. You felt conflicted with the party that you were having, and you went over there and this incident occurred where the police were involved.
Right.
You talked about ruining some clothes.
I was dressed for the party. I mean, I was wearing a silk slack suit, and it was ruined when he pushed me down. And he did push me down. I know he's going to deny that, but he did.
And when you went over there, you were going over there to talk to him about the basketball playing at that point?
You know, I admitted I had completely lost it. I had tried so many things to get him to behave like a human being in this neighborhood. I had called him, and that got no response. I called the police once, and that got no response. So all these people are at my house. I'm trying to have a party, and they are back there acting like animals. So
Okay.
yeah, I lost it.
So
I
you-
went over to his house.
So you went over to his house, and you were very upset and angry, and that's when this incident
Right.
occurred. Okay, and you were trying to talk to him in other situations as well.
Well, this has been going on for a while, yeah.
Okay, all right. Anything else that you feel? Do you feel I have a sense of what you're telling me from your perspective?
Yeah.
Is there anything that you want to correct, or that you feel I have inaccurately told you? heard
No,
from
I
you?
mean, other than the fact that I just like him to pay for my silk suit, and this basketball, it's got to stop.
Okay. We'll get to what it is you're specifically looking for a little bit more. I want to make sure, and then of course we're going to have a chance to really talk a lot more about that. What I'm going to ask you to do now is hold on, Kathy, while we hear from Steve and listen to Steve, and we will have a chance to all talk together after I finish with Steve. Steve, thank you for waiting there. I know that that's difficult.
Yeah, it is. She's telling you
Well, I really want to hear now from your perspective, because it's important for me to get the situation from both perspectives there. What concerns have brought you here, and what is it?
I was brought here because she filed the battery charges against me. That's why I'm here. What she said is true. She's called me. She calls me all the time. She called the police on me. She sent the police over, and I'll tell you right now why nothing happened when the police came over. Nothing happened because we weren't doing anything wrong. We were sitting there having a nice little basketball game in the backyard, and the police came over and said, this crazy woman next door called and said you guys were
I'm
making
sure the
noise.
police called me a crazy woman.
Okay.
I'm not
Look,
interested
all right,
I'll
in
tell you-
sitting
I'm
still
telling you-
watching you
Steve,
be...
Kathy,
Yeah.
we're going to be able to move along more quickly if I can finish with Steve, and if Kathy, you can hold
I'm
on.
sorry.
Any
I just-
comments?
yeah.
And you will have a chance to address any concerns as we talk more as a group later. Again, if you want to write anything down that you feel you might forget to address later toward the end of it, when we have a chance to all talk together, I'll just lay this out as some pen and paper if either of you feel you need to use that at any point. Steve, just tell me from your perspective about, you've moved recently into this neighborhood, and what's gone on with your home.
I
and-
moved in back in the fall. This is my first home. I bought this house, and I spent a good part of the fall fixing the house up. I'm a carpenter, so I work. I work on my own. I work on the place myself in my free time. I built the fence when I first moved in because I knew I was going to have this. I had a half court put in the backyard. Because I like to play basketball. I played basketball in high school. I got a lot of friends. We play a lot of basketball, and I didn't want to have to go down to the Y all the time, or over to the park every time I wanted to play. So we put this half court in the backyard, and it's been great. And I put the fence in because I knew I was going to put the basketball hoop in, and I didn't want to have to be chasing the ball into their yard every time.
So you wanted to be playing basketball at home, and you wanted to put the fence there to make sure that the basketball stayed in your yard and all of that.
I mean, we could only put an 8-foot fence up, so I put the 8-foot fence up. I built that myself when I moved in back in the fall, and installed it. I made sure it was on my property, and nobody's got any right to say anything about my fence. I put it in there, and it's my fence. And it's there because I didn't want to have to chase the ball into her yard every time it goes out of bounds or something like that. So that's it. What she said is true. The cops came over. The cops, like I said, said this crazy woman next door called and said you guys were making noise, and they were standing there watching us, and we were just playing basketball. I mean, it's not a big deal. We're playing a little basketball. So
Talk about the incident that brought you here today.
okay, she's right. That was one thing she didn't lie about. It was Memorial Day weekend, and she I guess had a bunch of people over. I mean, I didn't know what was going on next door. We got the fence. I couldn't see what was going on next door. and I had some friends over. It was we were cooking up some hot dogs and stuff, and having a few beers, and we were having a little party ourselves. It was not a big deal. There were, I guess we probably had 15 or 20 people there, and we had a couple of different teams that come over regularly and play. We have guys I work with, and some of the guys I went to school with come over, and we play basketball, and we had a couple of games going on, and it was like a little tournament. We kind of had like a little 3-on-3 tournament.
So there was
going.
so you had some guests, you had your own sort of social activities
Yeah,
going
it was
on.
just a little barbecue. It was no big deal. And I don't know what happened. I mean, I was just sitting there, and all of a sudden I heard my friends talking, and they knew about this woman because they'd been there when the cops came by before, and they had heard the phone calls before, and so they knew, and so they started. I heard them talking because I was actually out on the court at the time, and she comes over, and I kind of met her right at where the court ends. I was like, I say, hey, what the hell are you doing here? This is, and she came over, and she was absolutely a ranting, raving lunatic. I mean, the woman was completely out of control. Her arms were flying everywhere. She was screaming and yelling. That's why my friends were they're saying, hey, calm down, woman. I mean, she was just out of control, completely out of control. And she came over at me, and she's screaming about stopping playing basketball and all this other stuff. And I said, get out of here. I'm not gonna sit here and listen to you on my property talk to me like this. This is my house. Get off of my property. Okay. And she came at me, and it's not like I was scared, but she came after me, and I blocked her, and she tripped it because, like I said, it was right at the edge of the court. She tripped and fell back into the driveway. And she had that awful suit on. She talks about that silk suit. I think I probably did her it was probably the best thing that ever happened to her. That suit was ruined because that thing was
so
just
there was this
repulsive.
physical incident that happened, and then is there anything else about the situation that you think I need to know about?
Well, then the cops came by, and they said it was the same guy who had been by before. And he said, I'm sorry, she's filed battery charges against you, and so I got I don't know what it is. I had to go to court for it.
Okay. Let me just run through what I've heard from you and make sure that I'm getting your perspective on the situation. You mentioned a couple times that these court charges are something that are of concern to you.
Yeah.
And that you this is your first home. You said you've spent a good part of the fall working on it. And one of the things that you did was to build this fence, which was important to you so that you could be at home to play basketball, building the half court. Sounds like you...
I built the court in the spring. I built the
okay.
thing in the fall.
All right. So the fence preceded the court.
Yeah.
In a way to keep the basketball in your yard.
I was trying to do her a favor so we wouldn't be chasing the ball into her yard all the time.
And it sounds like there have been times where you've heard from Kathy in phone calls, and as well as this incident about the police. So there's been some conflict there between the two of you as neighbors.
Yeah, there is.
Over the basketball playing. Do you know if there's been any other concerns?
She just comes over whenever, or calls or whatever, anytime we're playing basketball.
This particular Memorial Day weekend, you were having a social outing in your backyard with your friends, and that's when this incident occurred.
It was a small party. It was, like I said, 15 or 20 people.
A gathering of your friends where Kathy came onto your property and this incident occurred.
Yes.
Okay. Anything you think I'm missing that you want to explain to me now? Well, we'll have time to explore this more, but do I seem to understand it from your perspective?
No, I think you got it. I think you understand. I mean, as long as you understand that I did not push her down. She's got nothing on me for those battery charges. And I don't think she could...
So you feel you blocked yourself and that you weren't intending in any way to push her down?
She said it herself that she was crazy, just going wild. She was so angry about whatever.
So it was an escalated situation, and it wasn't your intention to push her down in any way?
Well, I didn't push her down in any way. I blocked her coming at me.
Okay, so you don't feel you pushed her down. It was you feel she was very escalated?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so I think I've heard from each of you, at least at this point, what your concerns are about the situation. What I want to do now is, just before we move on, is ask each of you what it is that you're looking to see accomplished out of this meeting today. And Kathy, just let me move back to you. You mentioned something about the suit that you had concerns about. What specifically are you looking for here today?
I would like to be reimbursed for the suit that was ruined by the oil on his driveway when I fell down.
Okay. And
Fell down.
what
After I was pushed, okay?
and what other things are you looking to accomplish today?
Well, I mean, the main thing is I want the basketball to stop.
Okay.
I mean, he just has to stop having these tournaments in his backyard. It's ridiculous. It's a neighborhood. It's not a community center. And people don't live like that.
All right. So you're looking for some reimbursement on the suit that was ruined during that Memorial Day,
Right.
and for the basketball playing to cease.
Mhm.
Okay. And Steve, specifically, what is it that you're looking for?
Well, that's not going to happen. I'm not going to stop. You know, it's my property. I can play basketball on my property.
So
if I want.
continuing to play for you is important.
Yeah.
What else are you hoping to accomplish out of this
Well,
meeting today? You talked a little bit about.
I want her to
Um,
drop those charges.
Okay.
You know, I mean, I'm gonna keep playing basketball no matter what, and I want her to drop the charges.
Okay. So it's important for you to be able to continue playing and for you to get the court matter dealt with.
Yeah.
Okay. What we want to do now then is move so that I've heard from each of you individually and appreciate both of your efforts to try and let me get a better sense of what's going on with the situation. And now what we want to do is move so that the two of you can talk with each other and we can all talk together a little bit less formally. Before we do that, let me just outline what it seems that are the issues that we need to deal with today, that we need to discuss. Both of you have a concern with how to be able to use your property. Steve is talking about the basketball playing being very important, and Kathy's saying that that's interfering in her home and that the noise is causing some problems. There was some concern that was raised about the fence and the fact that that went up that we might want to address. We've talked, each of you have this matter at court that is an issue that we need to discuss. You are both homeowners in this area, and there's been some concerns about the way these issues have been dealt with in that situation that occurred over Memorial Day weekend. So we should address how problems in the future, or how as neighbors the two of you feel you need to discuss things, or what kind of rules or ideas that you need to keep a neighborly, not a neighborly relationship rather, but a relationship that isn't going to bring you back to the court or to the mediation table every time there's a concern. What other issues do you feel need to go on that list then to make sure that we talk about them?
I think you've covered everything that we said. I wonder if this is even worth continuing at this point, given his attitude. I mean, he's calling me a liar. He's not admitting to
You
anything
did
that
lie.
happened, and he doesn't seem willing to do anything to change.
Well, we're still at the beginning of our meeting, and I know that each of you may feel that it seems like it's a pretty big mountain to climb, but we're still at the beginning of our meeting, so why don't we dig in and all talk together, and maybe we can learn a little bit more about what each of you expect from each other. Let's talk a little bit at the beginning about this fence, which I know isn't necessarily the most important issue today, but it seems like something that there was a little bit of
It's an 8-foot fence.
miscommunication about that might help us resolve that. Kathy, you seemed frustrated by the fact that the fence went up, and I'm wondering if you knew any of the reasons that Steve had for putting up the fence.
No.
No.
No, all I know is that this kid moves in next door and starts tearing up his house.
This
and
kid who
building
bought
other
his own
things.
house.